Hey, it's Christina. So this is going to be a video on my experience as a visually impaired kid in school. A few of my YouTube friends have already done similar videos, so I'm going to go ahead and link those in the description. From an early age, I started off being in visually impaired classes. So at the school that I went to, there were two certified visually impaired teachers. One of them taught the younger kids, and then when we got to be about in third grade, we would transition to the class next door and be in the other ladies' class. And I remember in my early years, learning to read and write Braille. They taught us that under sleep shades, so we couldn't look at the dots. And I would imagine they probably taught me like print and numbers, just from probably giving me like extra large bold print worksheets to work on. We also had orientation and mobility training, and so a teacher would come in and work with each of us individually. So they would have me use the sleep shades and the cane, and of course I would peek underneath the sleep shades as often as I could, because I wanted to be able to see. And so they'd walk with me around campus and help me learn how to get from class to class and to the cafeteria and that kind of thing. And I know in more recent years I've heard the argument where some people say, oh well, I don't want to learn orientation and mobility under sleep shades, but I would recommend it because, nobody can predict what's going to happen with their vision. I feel like this kind of ties in with the video I recently did on disability inclusion and representation in the media. I'll go ahead and link that in the cards and in the description. But a lot of people will argue that disability is a lived experience, not a skill set. And I do agree with that to a certain extent. However, in my early years, I learned all of my blindness skills from sighted people. I'm not going to go too in depth in this video on social anxiety and bullying, but I will say I definitely hated school from an early age. I was one of those kids that, I remember in second grade, we took a class to learn to write cursive handwriting. And at the time I thought, I just learned to print. I'm 7 years old. Why do I need to learn cursive? So instead of, working on my cursive handwriting during class, the lady would hand us the worksheets and I would just use my pencil and color in the lines. I was also one of those kids that would daydream during my regular ed classes, because I would sit up at the front of the class so I could hear better, but I couldn't see the board. So a lot of times, what the teacher was talking about, either the subject matter or that combined with the fact that I couldn't really see what's going on, that would make me really bored. So I spent a lot of time daydreaming. For a while, my mom had me go to after school care, which is like, just like where the teachers will watch you and make sure you do your homework and, put movies on and stuff until your parents get there to pick you up. And I did have girl bullies, unfortunately, in after school care. But I remember at a certain point, one of my friends, who was probably a year or two younger than me, one of my friends from my visually impaired class, he was there with me also. And so I came up with this idea that it would be cool if we pretended to smoke. So we would rip off like little pieces of loose leaf paper and form them into the shape of cigarettes and go out in the playground and just walk around the perimeter of the playground, smoking our pretend cigarettes and talking to each other. I was invited to sleepovers and birthday parties for some of the sighted kids. But, overall my interests never really matched what they were interested in. In elementary school, I was really into Beetlejuice and the Addams Family and Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Lamb Chop's Play Along and Barney. Even when I was 10 years old, I was into Lamb Chop's Play Along and Barney. And the kids really made fun of me for that. And then when I got to middle school, my relationship with the regular ed kids changed, because even though some of them did transfer to the same school that I did, they all of a sudden didn't want anything to do with me. I was being ignored by the regular ed kids. So, you know, I just continued to be friends with the visually impaired kids because a lot of them had also transferred to the same middle school. I remember in middle school I took an honors English class, and the kids there were 11 years old, I was 12, and there were a series of classes where my teacher was cool with us bringing movies to class. And so one of the girls decided to bring the movie Clueless, which I was totally bored with. You know, for one thing, whenever, you know, teachers would show movies in class, you know, the movies weren't usually like at eye level for me. You know, a lot of the times it would be a TV that was like attached, you know, to like higher up on the wall. So I couldn't see it, you know, I just have to listen to it. So yeah, they were all into watching the movie Clueless, and I wanted to bring a movie too. So I brought the movie Babe, about the talking pig, and my English teacher really appreciated that. And then when I was 13, that was the age that I was obsessed with Harriet the Spy. So I remember in a completely different English class, we had to do an assignment, like a how-to speech, and I really wanted to do my assignment on how to be a spy. And she was like, oh no, I don't think that would be appropriate. Why don't you teach the kids how you use your cane? So that's what I ended up having to do for the speech. But like, it didn't make sense to me at the time, the kids, you know, disregard for Harriet the Spy, the fact that they thought it was babyish, because like, you know, I had watched the making of featurette, and I knew that these actors were around our same age. So like, why would the kids be acting so snobby toward it? So my accommodations in middle school and high school were I was permitted to use markers and highlighters if need be. I got copies of either the teacher's notes or notes from another kid in class, but they had to be in print. You know, so I would get extra time on tests. I would have tests read to me. Some of the tests would be in large print. On my lunch period, I wouldn't have to stand in the long line of regular ed kids, because that usually extended like halfway around the building. Instead, you know, whoever was standing by the door, they would let me in just so I would be inside in like the shorter cut of the line. And I was also able to leave class at the end of the day 15 minutes early to get a head start because, especially when I was in middle school, you know, we had to walk from the middle school all the way to the high school to the gym to catch our buses in the afternoon. So I did face some discrimination from teachers in both middle school and high school. Most notably, there was an incident when I was 13 years old with a history teacher, and the only thing that I knew of it at the time was that my visually impaired teacher had tried to bring a large print book to class, and the teacher got pissed off about it for some reason, and she yelled at me to come out in the hallway, and then they were, you know, they exchanged words, and you know, then the next day the history teacher came up and was like sobbing and apologetic, and then, you know, we never saw her again because she was replaced by another teacher. Well, I just found out recently that apparently this teacher never liked me from the get-go. She would say things to my visually impaired teacher like, you know, I don't want Christina in my class. I'm gonna move her from the front of the class to the back of the class. It hurts me to see her having to look at things so closely. And, you know, my visually impaired teacher would send me with my large print book to class to keep it there. And the history teacher would always send one of the regular ed kids to bring the book back to her. So my visually impaired teacher made a formal complaint with the principal, and the principal went back to the history teacher and she told her, look, you can either apologize and resign, or you're gonna be let go. So apparently that's why the history teacher was so apologetic to me the next day. So one thing you might find surprising about me is that I've never had a boyfriend. I was interested in, you know, the kids in my special ed classes when I was in elementary school and middle school. And then all of a sudden, once I got to high school, like, I pretty quickly found a guy who was in one or two of my classes that I was interested, you know, regular ed classes that I was interested in. And I mean, in total, I was probably interested in like at least 5 different guys that I can think of. And in my senior year, there was 2 guys with girlfriends I was interested in, and 1 guy who was gay. And I didn't know that the guy was gay until one of the sighted girls in my class told me that on Instant Messenger. And, you know, that whole concept was so new to me at the time since, you know, I had an overprotective mom. So at 17, you know, I was thinking, oh, well, maybe if I spend enough time talking to the guy, I can change his mind. So since those 3 specific guys weren't going to be asking me to the prom, I ended up deciding to go by myself. I wasn't willing to go with anybody else. Another thing that goes back to my video on disability representation and inclusion is the fact that when I was in high school, I knew of 3 girls who were in both the middle school and the high school who were visually impaired, and they were involved in the school plays. They acted in the school plays. So, you know, I'll admit I was kind of envious of that. You know, it never occurred to me that it was something that I wouldn't be able to do. The majority of the kids in my visually impaired class did not choose to use canes, and I honestly don't blame them because, you know, middle school and high school is when you're really trying to fit in as much as possible. And even nowadays, all of the visually impaired people that I've known in my real life, they don't use canes either, you know, they just want to be treated equally. You know, the only difference for me nowadays is, you know, I try to carry my cane around in a cool purse so that way I'll get compliments on my purse, and, you know, if people don't know me, they wouldn't even suspect that you got a cane in there. I was one of those kids that was always friends with the teachers in high school, especially like the English teachers and creative writing teachers and that kind of thing. You know, and it wasn't like a suck-up teacher's pet kind of thing, you know. I mean, I was an only child and my mom was a teacher, so I grew up around teachers. I was always used to being around adults. You know, I had to help take care of my grandma on weekends, and, you know, like when I went to family reunions on my dad's side of the family, I was the youngest one there until I was 18. So, you know, I really felt like I connected with them on that level. So when I first started out in college, I majored in journalism, and the school that I went to prioritized print journalism. They didn't teach any broadcast until the very final year. And honestly, the first year of print journalism was more than enough for me. You know, the teachers there were very serious, very suit and tie, and like I remember they would hand me my papers back that I would write, and, you know, I would end up getting C's on them, and they would give me the option to rewrite them. And I think part of the reason I didn't rewrite them is because I couldn't really read their handwriting. But, you know, the other part of me was like really my ego telling me, oh, well, I don't have to rewrite this. So my first year of college was really lonely, to tell you the truth. You know, I kind of still had that egotism where I thought, oh, well, everybody on campus already knows who I am, so if they want to talk to me, they'll have to come knock on my door and come hang out. My second year of college, one of my visually impaired friends joined me over there, and so we would hang out all the time. And then she ended up meeting a girl there who was completely blind and who was involved with the Center for the Blind and would go with them on Friday nights. One of the blind guys who worked there was married to a sighted woman, and she would drive everybody to the mall on Fridays. So once I found out that that was an option to me, you know, I started going there with them all the time, and, you know, everybody would separate and do their own thing. And I would usually start off by watching a movie, and then I would head to the music store to check out the CDs. And then my third year there was when my visually impaired friend ended up being introduced to her now husband. So I really resented the fact that she was constantly blowing off plans with me to hang out with this guy. And so by the end of that third year, I thought, you know, there's nothing keeping me here. So I ended up transferring to a school that was much closer to home. So I was able to go home on weekends. My mom would pick me up on Fridays and bring me back on Sundays. And there was a girl there that I knew who had cerebral palsy, and she had a group of regular ed friends, and so they became my friends too. And one of these girls was a broadcast journalism major, And honestly, if I had known of a school that had like a filmmaking option for a degree, I totally would have gone with that. But, you know, journalism was the most interesting thing that I saw of the subjects that were offered. So in my second year at that school, I ended up switching my major from general studies to broadcast journalism. And, you know, I DJ'd at the college radio station for 2 years. When it came to being able to get interesting stories for the radio station or for the news broadcast on campus, the sighted kids definitely had the advantage over me because, you know, they could rent the equipment from the broadcast journalism class and, you know, get in their car and drive a couple hours to go interview a band at a gig or something, you know. So whenever I needed to do a piece for the weekly news episode, you know, I would rent out the equipment and just do something on campus, interview, you know, I don't know, somebody from the culinary department or something like that, you know, just boring stuff. And for a while I wanted to be an entertainment journalist, but, you know, when I really thought about it, I was like, you know, I'm gonna have to get jobs at like really teeny tiny news stations and like go through a lot of like doing, you know, covering crime stories and stuff like that in order to get to where I want to be. So, you know, having to wait through all that just didn't seem worth it to me. And so, you know, I minored in speech theater. That helped me overcome some of my anxiety too. But it also helped me realize that I wasn't really a theater person. You know, we had some class assignments to where we had to help out with the play every semester, and so I helped out with at least 2 plays, if not 3. So, you know, I was one of the people that was helping to take the props on and off stage, and, you know, they would purposefully leave the lights up a little bit more so that I could see what I was doing. And, you know, I didn't really care for having to be there every single night for the show and sit backstage and wait around, but yet I also didn't want to be one of the actors because, like, you know, a lot of theater acting is like projecting your voice and overacting, and, you know, it just didn't sound, you know, real to me. At one point, I remember there was one summer where I went to go visit my friend Judith Molina, who worked at the Living Theater in New York, and one of her friends had suggested to me that I could see about getting an internship in New York. So I really love that idea. So, like, as soon as I went home from that vacation, I spent the whole half of the year researching places so I could make sure I had the most comprehensive list possible. And then when the opportunities opened up to apply for internships, I applied to 68 different places in New York. And I got contacted for interviews by Triple Threat Television, which ended up not following up with me to let me know if I had the internship or not. So then the second interview I had was with a lady at NBC Universal, and, you know, she kind of told me the same thing. She was like, oh yeah, we're interested, you know, you sound like you'd be a good fit for the team. And, you know, I mean, I didn't take her seriously, you know. I thought, well, you know, I'll believe it when I see it. You know, just to kind of save myself from being disappointed, you know, if it didn't work out. And the interesting thing was that I had also applied to some news stations here in Louisiana, and so I ended up getting both an acceptance letter from a local news station, as well as an acceptance letter from NBC Universal on the same day. And I remember my mom was home when I got those emails, and I was like, Mom, I'm going to New York. So I ended up paying to stay in hostels. So the way it worked was that every 2 weeks I had to switch from one hostel to another because you could only stay there for a certain amount of time. So I was 24 going on 25 this summer, and to give you an idea of how overprotective my mom was, she went to this Catholic hostel at least 2 times and would try to convince them to let me stay there because she felt like they would keep an eye on me. And I really enjoyed my internship overall. It really got me out of my social anxiety of talking on the phone because there were a lot of phone calls I would have to make. I always liked when they would send me on errands because it kind of helped me learn the subway system and learn the city a bit more. They never sent me on any errands outside of Manhattan. I don't know if it's because of my vision, or if they didn't do that because, you know, they knew I wasn't familiar with the area. I'm not sure. And the fact that I switched colleges and was only dealing with sighted people and I wasn't dealing with an Office of Disability Services at my second college, I feel like that really helped boost my confidence and, you know, my belief in myself that, you know, I could do as much as possible that sighted people could do. So I hope y'all enjoyed this insight into my school experience. I hope it was informative for y'all. And like I said, go ahead and check out Diana and Kayla's videos on this topic. I'm going to go ahead and link their channels below. I'd really encourage y'all to subscribe to them as well. And give this video a like, leave a comment if you feel inclined, subscribe if you aren't already, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.